Have you ever considered what it would be like to walk through a city so ancient that its very name whispers from the dust of forgotten millennia? Imagine a place where conversations, long silenced, once hummed with the daily rhythms of life, where strange facts about their beliefs would make your eyebrows do a little dance of disbelief, and mysteries still cling to the crumbling bricks like morning mist. We're talking about the Sumerians, a civilization that practically invented civilization itself. Long before the pyramids or even the Roman toga was a twinkle in anyone's eye. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Our journey begins not with a bang, but with the quiet, unassuming emergence of small settlements in the southern alluvium of Mesopotamia, that fertile crescent nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. It was here, in this land often called the cradle of civilization, that the earliest stirrings of what would become a complex society took root, with people learning to harness the unpredictable power of those very rivers. What did those first tiny villages look like? Historians still argue whether the earliest organized communities truly emerged from purely agricultural necessities, or if a more complex social structure was already at play, guiding their communal efforts even before the grand walls were built. But what we do know, what's genuinely mind-boggling, is how these seemingly simple communities began to lay the groundwork for something truly monumental. Think about it. They weren't just throwing seeds into the ground and hoping for the best. They were collectively deciding on where to dig canals, how to share resources, and who would do what. It's like the world's first ever co-op meeting, but with way more dirt and potentially a lot more arguing about whose sheep wandered where. These early Sumerians, living in places like Eridu and Ubaid, were mastering the art of living together on a scale never before seen. They weren't just hunter-gatherers anymore. They were farmers, builders, and nascent administrators. You can almost hear the murmuring of their daily lives, the squelch of mud bricks being laid, the gentle lowing of cattle, the rustle of reeds in the wind. Their homes, often modest structures of mud brick and reed, huddled together, creating the first hints of what we would recognize as neighborhoods. And within these nascent communities, you can detect the faint outlines of social structures, almost like looking at a blurry photograph that slowly comes into focus. There's an organization here, a nascent hierarchy, a sense of collective purpose that goes beyond mere survival. It's not just individuals fending for themselves. It's a group, a tribe, a burgeoning society making decisions together, even if those decisions were as basic as where to dig the next well, or how to protect their crops from rogue gazelles. This wasn't a sudden explosion of brilliance. It was a slow, deliberate evolution, like watching a tiny seed sprout and gradually unfurl into a robust plant, each new leaf a testament to their growing ingenuity. The very ground they walked on was alive with potential, a canvas waiting for the masterpiece of civilization to be painted upon it. It's almost as if the land itself, rich with silt and water, was nudging them, encouraging them to think bigger, build higher, and organize more efficiently. And so, the foundations were quietly laid, brick by painstaking brick, for the world's first true urban centers. From those humble beginnings, something truly remarkable began to unfold, culminating in what historians affectionately call the Uruk period urban revolution, a seismic shift in human habitation that saw the rise of the very first true cities. Imagine, if you will, looking down from a very slow-moving drone, or perhaps a particularly patient griffin, if we're sticking with the ancient vibes, at a sprawling settlement unlike anything seen before. This wasn't just a bigger village. This was Uruk, a colossal metropolis that, at its peak, housed tens of thousands of people. It was a place where conversations became a cacophony, where the strange fact of so many diverse lives intertwining in one place was the new normal, and where the mystery of how they coordinated such massive efforts still sparks debates among scholars. Was it charismatic leaders, religious fervor, or simply the sheer logistical challenge that drove them to such unprecedented organization? Uruk didn't just grow, it exploded, becoming a magnet for people from the surrounding agricultural lands. They came for opportunity, for safety, for the sheer buzz of urban life, perhaps even for the ancient Sumerian equivalent of a good chai latte. Who knows? The scale of its monumental architecture alone is enough to drop your jaw. We are talking about massive temple complexes, particularly those dedicated to the goddess Inanna and the sky god An, that would have utterly dominated the skyline. These weren't just big buildings, they were statements. They proclaimed power, devotion, and a sophisticated understanding of engineering and labor organization. Imagine thousands of workers, not with modern tools, but with their bare hands, simple copper implements, and an abundance of mud bricks, constructing structures that would dwarf anything built for millennia. It's enough to make you tired just thinking about it, isn't it? I mean, who needs a gym membership when you've got a ziggurat to build? The shift to true urban living brought with it profound changes. No longer was everyone involved in food production. Specialization became the norm. You had farmers, yes, but also potters, weavers, metalworkers, priests, administrators, and even, one can only assume, professional complainers about the traffic flow near the main temple. This division of labor fostered incredible innovation and efficiency, but also created complex social dynamics. The sheer density of population meant new challenges in sanitation, resource management, and social control. It forced them to think on a scale unimaginable to their village-dwelling ancestors. How do you feed that many people? How do you keep the peace? How do you ensure everyone plays by the rules? These weren't abstract philosophical questions. They were daily, pressing concerns that demanded ingenious solutions. One of the most fascinating aspects of Uruk's urban revolution is how it set a precedent for future cities across the globe. The blueprint for urban life, a central authority, specialized labor, monumental public works, and a complex administrative system, was essentially drawn up in Uruk. The very idea of a city, as we understand it, a vibrant hub of human activity, commerce, and culture, largely began here. Historians still argue whether the organizational impetus came primarily from the religious institutions and the need to manage their vast temple economies, or from a more secular, proto-governmental authority emerging to handle the growing population. Regardless, Uruk stands as a testament to human ingenuity and our seemingly innate desire to gather, build, and create something larger than ourselves. It was a city that hummed with life, a truly revolutionary concept that fundamentally reshaped human existence, forever changing where and how we lived, worked, and interacted. It's almost as if the very air of Uruk buzzed with the energy of collective ambition. drawing people in and transforming them into citizens of the world's first great urban experiment. And with the burgeoning complexity of Uruk, with its teeming populations and intricate administration, came an undeniable need. How do you keep track of everything? How do you manage the flow of grain, the allocation of labor, the offerings to the gods, and the endless list of who owes what to whom? The answer, a truly astounding leap in human cognitive ability, was the invention of cuneiform, a system of writing that didn't just transform record-keeping, but fundamentally altered the very fabric of human communication, forever changing how knowledge was stored and transmitted. Imagine the sheer mental gymnastics involved in moving from simple tokens to abstract symbols representing sounds and ideas. It's like going from counting on your fingers to inventing calculus overnight. Before cuneiform, they used clay tokens of various shapes to represent goods. A cone for a measure of grain, a sphere for a jar of oil. These were often sealed in clay envelopes, which worked fine until you wanted to know what was inside without breaking the seal. The solution? Impressing the shape of the tokens onto the outside of the envelope. And then, the light bulb moment. Why even bother with the tokens inside? Just impress the shapes directly onto a flat piece of clay. From there, it was a short, albeit brilliant, hop to abstracting those impressions into stylized pictures, and then, crucially, to symbols representing sounds. This evolution, from pictograms to phonograms, is a strange fact that still fascinates linguists and historians alike, a testament to the human brain's incredible capacity for abstraction. It's almost as if the clay tablets themselves were whispering, "Give us more. We can hold more than just numbers." The earliest cuneiform tablets, dating back to around 3200 BCE, were primarily administrative and economic records. They meticulously documented transactions, inventories, and labor assignments. You can almost hear the ancient accountants sighing with relief as they no longer had to rely on memory or an ever-growing pile of clay tokens. Finally, they might have thought, a system where I can prove that Grog owes me 3 sheep and not just 2. This wasn't just about efficiency. It was about accountability and the ability to manage a complex economy. Historians still argue whether the initial impetus for writing was purely economic, driven by the needs of the temple economy, or if it also served a nascent political function, allowing rulers to issue decrees and maintain control over a wider territory. But cuneiform quickly evolved beyond mere bookkeeping. It became the medium for literature, law, history, and even personal letters. The Epic of Gilgamesh, which we'll delve into later, was preserved on cuneiform tablets, allowing us to hear the echoes of ancient myths and heroes. Legal codes, like that of Ur-Nammu, were inscribed, providing a tangible framework for justice and societal order. Imagine a scribe, hunched over a damp clay tablet, carefully pressing wedge-shaped marks with a reed stylus, knowing that their words might endure for thousands of years. It's a powerful thought, isn't it? The very act of writing transformed fleeting thoughts into permanent records, allowing ideas to transcend generations and geographical boundaries. This wasn't just a tool. It was a revolution in how humanity interacted with information. It was the ancient world's internet, albeit a much slower, heavier, and more breakable version. The mystery of how such a complex system was developed and disseminated so widely still captivates scholars, a testament to the collaborative genius of the early Sumerians. With the foundational elements of urban living and written communication firmly in place, the stage was set for the next grand act in the Sumerian saga. The early dynastic city-states emerge. Imagine Mesopotamia as a patchwork quilt, each vibrant square representing an independent city-state, each with its own proud identity, its own local customs, and, crucially, its own distinct patron deity. This was a time of dynamic growth, but also of simmering rivalries. A period where the conversations weren't just about trade and harvests, but about alliances, border disputes, and the occasional declaration of war. It's a strange fact to consider that the very concept of a sovereign nation-state, a fundamental building block of modern geopolitics, has its ancient roots in these fiercely independent Sumerian cities. Cities like Ur, Lagash, Umma, Kish, and Nippur weren't just dots on a map. They were powerful, self-governing entities, each a universe unto itself. Each city had its own king, or ensi, a priestly ruler, its own administrative structure, and its own army. This political fragmentation, while leading to frequent conflicts, also fostered incredible innovation as each city vied for prominence and resources. Think of it like a fiercely competitive ancient Olympics, but instead of medals, the prize was fertile land, trade routes, and bragging rights over whose god was more influential. Historians still argue whether the initial formation of these distinct city-states was a natural consequence of geographic separation and local resource control, or if it was more influenced by developing religious identities and the specific cult of a particular deity. The concept of a patron deity was central to the identity of each city-state. The temple, often a towering ziggurat at the heart of the city, wasn't just a place of worship. It was the economic engine, the administrative center, and the symbolic heart of the community. The god or goddess was considered the true owner of the city's land and resources, with the king serving as their earthly steward. This meant that religious devotion and civic duty were intertwined, creating a powerful sense of collective identity and purpose. It's almost as if the city itself was a giant extension of the temple, with every citizen contributing to the divine household. And sometimes, these divine rivalries spilled over into very human conflicts. When Umma and Lagash, for instance, squabbled over a disputed border strip of fertile land, it wasn't just a territorial dispute. It was almost a theological debate, a contest between their respective patron gods. "My god is better than your god," they might have muttered under their breath, right before picking up their spears. This era saw incredible advancements in social organization and political thought. The very notion of kingship, distinct from purely priestly authority, began to solidify. While early rulers often held both religious and secular power, the emphasis on a hereditary line of kings emerged, creating dynastic rule. The royal standard of Ur, with its depictions of both war and peace, provides a vivid snapshot of this period, showcasing the king as both a military leader and a benevolent provider. The mystery of how these disparate city-states managed to coexist, often forming alliances and trading networks even amidst their squabbles, reveals a sophisticated understanding of diplomacy and mutual benefit. Despite their independence, there was a shared cultural substrate, a common Sumerian identity expressed through language, religious beliefs, and artistic styles. It was a complex dance of autonomy and interconnectedness, a delicate balance that somehow held for centuries, laying the groundwork for even larger political entities to emerge later. It's truly amazing how they managed to build such complex societies with their internal bureaucracies and external relations, all while dealing with the ever-present threat of a neighboring city-state deciding your sheep looked particularly tasty. From the vibrant, often contentious landscape of the early dynastic city-states, our journey takes us to a place of unparalleled grandeur and unsettling revelations, the royal tombs of Ur's secrets. Imagine stumbling upon a burial site so rich, so laden with artifacts, and so tragically revealing of ancient practices that it would send shivers down your spine. That's precisely what archaeologist Leonard Woolley discovered in the 1920s when he unearthed these incredible tombs, revealing astounding wealth, intricate craftsmanship, and the strange, chilling fact of human sacrifice. It's a mystery that still prompts hushed conversations among scholars. How could a civilization so advanced in so many ways also engage in such brutal rituals? The discovery at Ur wasn't just another archaeological dig. It was a window into the very heart of Sumerian beliefs about death, the afterlife, and the absolute power of their rulers. We're talking about burials that contained not just the deceased king or queen, but also their entire entourage: soldiers, musicians, attendants, and even oxen, all seemingly accompanying their royal master or mistress into the next world. The sheer volume of astounding wealth found within these tombs, gold helmets, lapis lazuli beards, elaborate jewelry, and finely crafted musical instruments, speaks volumes about the resources available to the Sumerian elite and their belief in equipping the dead for a glorious afterlife. It's like they were planning the world's most extravagant going-away party, complete with the entire band and catering staff. The most perplexing and poignant aspect of these discoveries, however, was the evidence of human sacrifice. In certain death pits associated with the royal tombs, archaeologists found rows of bodies, often adorned with elaborate headdresses and jewelry, seemingly interred willingly alongside their ruler. The way they were found, often neatly arranged, suggests not a frantic massacre, but a ritualized act. This is the part that sparks endless discussion. Was it voluntary, an honor for those chosen to accompany their king or queen? Was it enforced, a grim duty? Or perhaps a bit of both, a societal expectation so deeply ingrained that resistance was unthinkable? Historians still argue whether the sacrifices were truly voluntary acts of extreme devotion or coercive acts of power designed to solidify the ruler's authority, especially since no signs of struggle were found. The silence of those ancient bones, arrayed in their final ceremonial repose, holds a profound mystery that continues to intrigue and disturb us. These burials are not just a morbid curiosity. They speak volumes about Sumerian beliefs and power. They reflect a complex cosmology where the earthly ruler was seen as a divine intermediary, and their passage into the afterlife was a monumental event that required an appropriately grand procession. The scale of the sacrifices and the richness of the grave goods underscore the immense power wielded by the Sumerian monarchs, a power that extended even into the realm of death. It also suggests a strong belief in an afterlife where the earthly hierarchy continued, where the king or queen would still need their retinue to serve them. the artifacts recovered, such as the famous ram in a thicket, or the elaborate lyres adorned with bullheads, are not just beautiful objects. They are tangible links to a world where life and death were deeply intertwined with religious conviction and political authority. These silent witnesses from the past continue to offer a powerful, if sometimes unsettling, conversation about what it meant to be a king or queen in ancient Sumer, and the lengths to which a society would go to honor its leaders and secure their place in the hereafter. It's a stark reminder that even in the dawn of civilization, the lines between belief, power, and ritual could be incredibly, chillingly blurred. Stepping away from the solemn grandeur of the royal tombs, we now delve into the very heart of what animated Sumerian life, their intricate and profound Sumerian religion and pantheon. Imagine a world where the divine wasn't distant or abstract, but incredibly present, where gods and goddesses were as real as the fertile earth beneath their feet, shaping every aspect of their existence, from the rising of the sun to the flow of the rivers. It's a strange fact that, unlike some later monotheistic traditions, the Sumerians saw their numerous deities as very much involved in human affairs, often capricious, sometimes benevolent, and always demanding respect and sustenance. The constant conversations they imagined having with their gods, through prayers and offerings, were the bedrock of their society, a mystery to us in its intensity. Theirs was a truly complex polytheistic system, a vast assembly of powerful gods and goddesses, each with specific domains and responsibilities. At the apex stood deities like Enlil, the god of wind, air, earth, and storms, whose pronouncements determined fates; Enki, the clever god of water, wisdom, and magic, often seen as humanity's benefactor; and Nana Sen, the moon god, patron of Ur, whose light illuminated the night. Then there was Inanna, later Ishtar, the vibrant and multifaceted goddess of love, war, and fertility, whose passionate myths often involved dramatic descents to the underworld. It was a divine soap opera of epic proportions, with intergod rivalries, romances, and occasional petty squabbles. You can almost hear the Sumerians whispering, "Did you hear what Enlil did to Enki last Tuesday?" Classic Enlil. These deities weren't just abstract concepts. They were believed to reside in the elaborate temples, particularly the towering ziggurats that dominated the cityscapes. The priests and priestesses served as their earthly caretakers, responsible for daily rituals, offerings of food and drink, and interpreting divine will. The temple economy, as we've touched upon, was immense, demonstrating the sheer societal investment in appeasing and honoring the gods. Every aspect of daily life, from planting crops to building houses, was imbued with religious significance. Before undertaking any major endeavor, divination would be performed to ascertain the gods' favor. It's a testament to their profound faith that even the smallest action had a spiritual dimension. The intricate rituals performed within and outside the temples were not mere formalities. They were seen as essential acts to maintain cosmic order and ensure the prosperity of the city-state. These rituals often involved elaborate processions, music, offerings of precious goods, and even sacred marriage ceremonies between the king and a high priestess, symbolizing the union of the ruler with the divine and ensuring fertility for the land. Historians still argue whether the primary function of these elaborate rituals was genuinely to communicate with the divine, or if they also served a crucial socio-political role in reinforcing the authority of the priestly class and the king. Regardless, the impact on their society was undeniable. This pervasive religious belief shaped every aspect of Sumerian life and governance. The king ruled not by his own divine right, but as the chosen steward of the city's patron deity. Laws were often presented as divine decrees, and justice was seen as upholding the god's will. Even the constant warfare between city-states often had a religious dimension, as each city's patron deity was believed to be fighting on their side. The mysteries embedded in their elaborate creation myths, their flood stories, which bear striking resemblances to later traditions, and their concept of the underworld continue to fascinate and inform our understanding of early human spiritualism. Their gods weren't just figures in the sky. They were active participants in the daily drama of Sumerian existence, demanding their attention, their devotion, and sometimes a really good party. From the divine realm of gods and rituals, we now turn our attention to the heroic and profoundly human, the epic tales of Gilgamesh, hero, king, legend. Imagine sitting around a flickering oil lamp in ancient Uruk, listening to a storyteller enthrall an audience with the exploits of their legendary king, a figure whose conversations with gods and monsters echoed with the very human struggles of power, friendship, and the chilling realization of mortality. It's a strange fact that this epic conceived millennia ago still resonates so powerfully today, exploring mysteries that are as timeless as humanity itself. The Epic of Gilgamesh isn't just a story. It's arguably the world's first great work of literature, written on those very cuneiform tablets we discussed. Gilgamesh, the protagonist of this sprawling narrative, is presented as the powerful, albeit initially tyrannical, king of Uruk. The epic opens by describing him as 2/3 god and 1/3 human, possessing immense strength and an insatiable desire for glory. Often at the expense of his own people, he's not exactly a hero in the modern sense at first. He's a bit of a bully, actually, demanding his rights as king, which included, shall we say, a certain level of inconvenience for his subjects. You can almost hear the ancient Urukians muttering, "Oh, here comes Gilgamesh again. I hope he doesn't decide to build another wall today. My back is killing me." But the gods, hearing the pleas of the Urukians, decide to create a rival for Gilgamesh, a wild man named Enkidu, raised among animals and possessing strength equal to the king. Their initial confrontation is a titanic struggle, a wrestling match that shakes the very foundations of Uruk. But it leads not to enmity, but to an unbreakable bond of friendship. This relationship between Gilgamesh and Enkidu is one of the most poignant aspects of the epic, showcasing the transformative power of companionship. It's a mystery how such a profound depiction of platonic love could emerge so fully formed in humanity's earliest literature, serving as a powerful counterpoint to Gilgamesh's earlier arrogance. This friendship softens Gilgamesh, turning him from a despotic ruler into a more compassionate leader. Together, Gilgamesh and Enkidu embark on daring adventures, confronting monstrous guardians of sacred forests, slaying the bull of heaven sent by the angry goddess Ishtar, remember Inanna from section 6, and generally making life difficult for any mythical creature that stood in their way. These exploits solidify Gilgamesh's reputation as a hero. But the core of the epic lies not in these triumphs, but in the profound tragedy that follows. Enkidu, as punishment from the gods for their audacious deeds, falls ill and dies. Gilgamesh's lament for his lost friend is one of the most heart-wrenching passages in ancient literature, a raw outpouring of grief that is universally relatable. Enkidu's death forces Gilgamesh to confront his own mortality, leading him on a desperate quest for immortality. He journeys to the end of the earth, crosses the waters of death, and seeks out Utnapishtim, the only human granted eternal life by the gods after a great flood. Sound familiar? This arduous journey is not just a physical one. It's a profound spiritual and philosophical exploration. Gilgamesh faces trials, deceptions, and ultimately, the bitter truth that immortality is not for mortals. The conversation he has with Utnapishtim, revealing the story of the flood, is another strange and compelling aspect of the epic, a point of endless fascination for comparative mythologists. While he fails to gain eternal life, Gilgamesh returns to Uruk a wiser, more benevolent king, having accepted the inevitability of death and realizing that true immortality lies in his deeds, his city, and the stories that will be told about him. The Epic of Gilgamesh, carved into clay millennia ago, therefore became his true immortality, a conversation across time, reminding us that even the mightiest kings eventually face the same fundamental questions about life, death, and what truly endures. From the grand adventures of legendary kings, let's ground ourselves in the very soil that made Sumerian civilization possible. Their astounding agricultural innovations and sustenance. Imagine a landscape that, left to its own devices, could be either a parched desert or a muddy swamp, depending on the whims of two mighty rivers. Yet, the Sumerians transformed this challenging environment into a verdant paradise, a breadbasket that supported burgeoning cities and complex social structures. This wasn't magic. It was the result of ingenious engineering and collective effort. A strange fact, considering the relatively simple tools they possessed. The conversations around ancient Sumerian dinner tables must have frequently revolved around the weather, the water levels, and of course, the success of the latest harvest, for their very lives depended on it. The key to their success lay in mastering the unpredictable yet life-giving Tigris and Euphrates rivers. These rivers, while providing fresh water, also brought devastating floods and left behind fertile silt. The challenge was to control the floods and distribute the water efficiently, especially during the dry seasons. Their solution was the development of ingenious irrigation systems. We're talking about vast networks of canals, ditches, dikes, and reservoirs, meticulously planned and maintained. It's a mainstream historical fact that these complex systems required an enormous amount of coordinated labor, foresight, and sophisticated hydraulic engineering knowledge. Imagine thousands of people digging, clearing, and reinforcing these waterways year after year. It's like building a massive, ancient water delivery pizza service. But instead of pizza, it's sustenance for an entire civilization. And sometimes, you could almost hear an ancient Sumerian scratching their head, pondering the mystery of why one year's flood was so perfect and the next year's was, well, a bit of a soggy disaster. These irrigation systems allowed them to transform the harsh Mesopotamian environment into incredibly productive farmland, capable of yielding multiple harvests a year. Their primary crop was barley, a versatile grain that could be made into bread, porridge, and perhaps most importantly, beer. Wheat, dates, and various vegetables also supplemented their diet. They developed sophisticated plows, sometimes drawn by oxen, to prepare the fields and sickles for harvesting. The development of the seed plow, which allowed seeds to be dropped directly into the furrow as it was being plowed, was a particularly clever invention that greatly increased efficiency. It's truly impressive how they adapted to their environment, turning potential obstacles into opportunities. The ability to produce a surplus of food was absolutely critical. It's what supported a growing population and allowed for the specialization of labor we discussed earlier. If everyone had to farm just to survive, there would be no scribes, no priests, no artisans, and certainly no kings to build elaborate tombs. The agricultural surplus freed a significant portion of the population to pursue other crafts and professions, fueling the urban revolution and the rise of complex societal structures. It was the foundation upon which everything else was built, quite literally. Historians still argue whether the development of these large-scale irrigation systems was primarily driven by the needs of an already centralized temple economy, or if the necessity of such cooperative endeavors actually led to the initial formation of more centralized authority. So while the stories of kings and gods capture our imagination, remember the quiet, persistent genius of the Sumerian farmers and engineers, their tireless efforts in the fields, their innovative solutions to environmental challenges, and their ability to feed a burgeoning civilization were just as vital, if not more so, than any grand conquest or epic poem. They were the unsung heroes who ensured that the conversations could continue, the cities could thrive, and the entire civilization could flourish, all thanks to a well-irrigated field and a very well-behaved ox. And perhaps, at the end of a long, hot day of digging canals, they indulged in a good, cold barley brew, contemplating the mystery of how they managed to pull it all off. Having explored the fertile ground that sustained them, let's now appreciate the beauty and intricacy that sprung forth from Sumerian hands, their remarkable craftsmanship and artistic expressions. Imagine walking through a bustling Sumerian marketplace, not just seeing utilitarian objects, but encountering works of art that speak of a profound aesthetic sense and astonishing technical skill. From the shimmering gold of a royal helmet to the delicate etching on a cylinder seal, Sumerian artistry showcased remarkable skill and a deeply ingrained aesthetic sensibility. A strange fact, considering how early they were in the grand timeline of human development. The conversations these pieces must have sparked about their beauty, their meaning, and the master artisans who created them echo through the millennia. The Sumerians were truly masters of various media. They worked with stone, precious metals, shell, and lapis lazuli, often imported from distant lands. Remember that? We'll dive deeper into trade later. Their metalworking, particularly in copper, bronze, and gold, was exceptionally advanced. Take, for instance, the famous golden helmet of Mescalamdug from the royal tombs of Ur. It's not just a piece of armor. It's a stunning example of repoussé work, meticulously hammered out of a single sheet of gold to mimic a finely coiffed wig, complete with individual strands of hair. It's the kind of piece that makes you gasp, wondering at the patience and precision required. Who knew ancient warriors could be so stylish? Their artistic expressions weren't just about beauty. They served powerful functions, often religious or commemorative. Statues, typically made of alabaster or gypsum, often depicted worshippers with clasped hands and wide staring eyes, eternally praying on behalf of their patrons. These weren't mere portraits. They were spiritual placeholders, continuously offering devotion in the temple, even when the actual person was elsewhere. The level of detail on these figures, from the intricate carving of beards to the delicate folds of their garments, hints at a society that valued artistry and skill highly. Perhaps one of the most iconic forms of Sumerian art is the cylinder seal. These small cylindrical objects, usually made of stone, were intricately carved with scenes of gods, mythical creatures, heroic exploits, or daily life. When rolled across wet clay, they left a continuous, raised impression, serving as a signature, a mark of ownership, or an administrative stamp. The miniature narratives captured on these seals are fascinating, offering tiny windows into their beliefs, rituals, and even their sense of humor. Imagine trying to carve something so detailed on such a small curved surface. It's enough to give you carpal tunnel just thinking about it. Historians still argue whether the consistent iconography on these seals reflects a strict religious dogma or a more fluid artistic tradition, adapting to local tastes and individual commissions. From elaborate mosaics crafted from shell, lapis, and red limestone, like those found on the royal standard of Ur, to intricate jewelry and musical instruments, Sumerian craftsmanship left an indelible mark. The lyres from Ur, adorned with the heads of bulls, often made of gold and lapis, are not just musical instruments. They are multimedia art pieces, combining carving, metalwork, and inlay. The discovery of the materials used in these pieces, sourced from places as far away as Afghanistan for lapis lazuli or Anatolia for copper, also tells a fascinating story about their extensive trade networks, which we'll soon explore. The mystery of how they achieved such technical mastery with relatively rudimentary tools continues to inspire awe. These objects, far from being mere relics, are a vibrant, ongoing conversation with the past, revealing a people who not only built cities and codified laws, but also sought to infuse their world with beauty and meaning, demonstrating that even in the earliest days of civilization, the human spirit yearned for more than just survival. Just as the beauty of Sumerian craftsmanship was evident in their use of exotic materials, those very materials hint at another crucial aspect of their thriving civilization: their extensive trade networks and economic exchange. Imagine a world before modern transportation, where goods moved slowly, often overland, by donkey caravan or by riverboat. Yet the Sumerians managed to connect with distant lands, establishing a sophisticated web of commerce that fueled their growth and brought unprecedented resources into their city-states. It's a strange fact that a civilization so ancient could operate on such a global scale, facilitating conversations and cultural diffusion across vast distances. Mesopotamia, as you might recall, was rich in fertile land and water, but notoriously poor in essential raw materials like timber, stone, and metals. To build their monumental structures, craft their exquisite art, and forge their tools and weapons, the Sumerians had to acquire these resources from elsewhere. This necessity spurred the development of elaborate trade routes that stretched far beyond their immediate geographical boundaries. Think of it as the ancient world's Amazon, but with more donkeys and fewer drone deliveries. Their primary trade partners were regions to the north, east, and west. They imported copper from Dilmun, modern Bahrain, and Magan, modern Oman and the UAE, and possibly from Anatolia, modern Turkey. Gold came from Egypt, or perhaps the Indus Valley. The highly prized lapis lazuli, which you saw so beautifully incorporated into the oud jewelry and seals, was sourced all the way from Afghanistan. Timber, particularly cedars for roofing and larger construction, came from the Zagros Mountains or the distant forests of Lebanon. Precious stones and other exotic goods flowed in from Persia, and even as far as the Indus Valley civilization, with whom they had fascinating, albeit still somewhat mysterious, connections. You can almost picture Sumerian merchants haggling in ancient marketplaces, speaking a pidgin language that was a mix of Sumerian, Akkadian, and whatever else got the deal done. This economic exchange wasn't just about raw materials. It also involved finished goods and ideas. Sumerian textiles, especially their finely woven woolen cloths, were highly sought after and exported. Their distinctive pottery, seals, and cuneiform tablets have been found in distant lands, testifying to the reach of their cultural influence. The constant movement of goods also meant a flow of people, merchants, artisans, and perhaps even curious travelers, fostering intercultural conversations and the exchange of knowledge. Historians still argue whether the primary drivers of this extensive trade were state-sponsored expeditions, organized by temples or palaces, or largely the initiative of independent private merchants, operating under royal protection. The logistical challenges of this trade were immense. Riverboats plied the Tigris and Euphrates, carrying goods to and from the Persian Gulf. Overland caravans navigated deserts and mountains, facing dangers from bandits and the elements. The invention of writing, particularly for keeping accurate records of transactions, must have been a godsend for these ancient traders. Imagine trying to keep track of a caravan full of copper ingots and lapis lazuli without a proper ledger. The very existence of such extensive networks highlights the Sumerians' entrepreneurial spirit, their organizational capabilities, and their ability to forge relationships, sometimes peaceful, sometimes tense, with distant peoples. It's a fascinating mystery how these early trade mechanisms evolved, demonstrating a remarkable level of economic sophistication. The flow of goods was the lifeblood of their economy, underpinning their prosperity and allowing their civilization to flourish, proving that even back then, a good import-export business could really make a city-state sing. With the flow of goods and ideas establishing a bustling economy, it's time to look at the people themselves and how they were organized within their sophisticated urban centers, their intricate social stratification, and daily life. Imagine Sumerian society as a pyramid with distinct layers, each playing a defined role, from the exalted king at the apex to the humble farmer tilling the fields. It's a strange fact that even in these earliest civilizations, such rigid hierarchies emerged, shaping the daily conversations and interactions of every man, woman, and child. The mystery lies in how such a complex system of duties and privileges was established and maintained for centuries without widespread upheaval. At the very top of the Sumerian social pyramid sat the king, or Ensi, priest king, who, as we've seen, was considered the earthly representative of the city's patron deity. Below him were the powerful priests and priestesses who managed the vast temple estates, performed rituals, and interpreted the will of the gods. These two groups held immense political, economic, and religious authority, often working hand in hand to govern the city-state. They lived in grand palaces and temples, surrounded by luxury and served by numerous attendants. Next came the burgeoning class of scribes, administrators, and military officials. Scribes, as we know, were crucial for managing the complex bureaucracy of the city, keeping records, and preserving knowledge. They held a privileged position due to their specialized literacy skills. Remember, reading and writing cuneiform was no easy feat. Military leaders and soldiers were also vital, especially given the frequent intercity conflicts, providing defense and expanding territory. Below them were the merchants, those enterprising individuals who braved distant lands to bring back valuable resources, and the skilled artisans, the metalworkers, jewelers, potters, and weavers, whose craftsmanship we've admired. These were the middle strata, enjoying a degree of prosperity and influence, often living in more comfortable homes within the city walls. The vast majority of the population, however, consisted of farmers and laborers. These were the people who toiled in the fields, maintained the irrigation canals, constructed the monumental buildings, and generally kept the economy running. Their daily life was one of hard work, dictated by the cycles of agriculture and the demands of the ruling elite. While their lives were undoubtedly challenging, archaeological evidence suggests a degree of community and cooperation, particularly in agricultural endeavors. Their homes would have been simpler mud brick structures, often with central courtyards, providing shelter and a space for daily activities. You can almost hear the conversations of neighbors sharing stories, gossiping about the latest temple decree, or simply complaining about the never-ending task of canal maintenance. At the very bottom of the social hierarchy were the slaves. Slavery existed in Sumer, often as a result of debt, war capture, or being born into servitude. Slaves performed a variety of tasks, from domestic work to labor on large agricultural estates or in workshops. While their lives were undoubtedly harsh, it's a mainstream historical fact that Sumerian law did provide some protections for slaves, allowing them to own property, engage in trade, and even buy their freedom under certain circumstances. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of slavery in Sumerian society significantly impacted its economic development, with some suggesting it was a fundamental labor source, and others arguing its economic impact was more limited. Despite the rigid social structure, life in Sumerian cities was vibrant. Markets bustled with activity. Religious festivals provided entertainment and spiritual solace, and families gathered for meals and stories. Children would have played games, learning the skills necessary for their future roles. The conversations were, no doubt, similar to ours in many ways, about family, food, work, and the mysterious ways of the world, albeit filtered through a very different cultural lens. The daily rhythms of life, from the call to prayer from the ziggurat to the distant shouts of merchants, wove together the tapestry of Sumerian society, a complex and enduring testament to their organizational genius. While the Sumerian cities thrived on internal order and intricate social structures, the external reality was often far from peaceful. Our next topic delves into the frequent and often brutal reality of warfare and intercity conflicts. Imagine the air thick with tension, the conversations shifting from trade and harvest to military strategy, and the strange fact that cities sharing a common culture and language were constantly locked in battles for supremacy. The very landscape of Mesopotamia was etched with the scars of these skirmishes, a constant reminder of the volatile political environment and the relentless struggle for dominance. The mystery of why these conflicts were so pervasive, even when they shared so much, continues to puzzle scholars. The period of the early dynastic city-states, which we explored earlier, was characterized by an almost continuous state of low-level conflict. Each independent city-state, proud of its unique identity and devoted to its patron deity, viewed its neighbors with a mix of cooperation and suspicion. While trade and cultural exchange often flourished, remember our discussion on trade networks? Competition for fertile land, access to crucial trade routes, and control over water resources frequently escalated into armed clashes. It was like a very intense, ancient neighborhood watch, where everyone had their own yard. But they also kept a very close eye on the fences. These conflicts were often fought over specific geographical features, like the highly fertile Guedina Plain, disputed by Lagash and Duma, a conflict that lasted for generations and is well documented in Sumerian inscriptions. The inscriptions speak of border disputes, incursions, and the often devastating consequences for the losing side. Early Sumerian armies were composed primarily of citizen soldiers, conscripted during times of need, led by the king or an appointed general. Their weaponry included spears, axes, maces, and bows, with soldiers often protected by leather or copper helmets and large shields. The famous Standard of Ur, which we briefly touched upon, visually depicts both the peace and war aspects of Sumerian life, offering a vivid glimpse into their military organization, complete with chariots, though these were more like heavy battle wagons pulled by onagers, ancient donkeys, than the nimble chariots of later empires. The constant struggle for dominance meant that cities had to invest heavily in defense. Walls, sometimes massive and fortified, encircled every major urban center, a testament to the ever-present threat. The very existence of these fortifications underscores the perilous nature of their political landscape. When one city was victorious, it might exact tribute from the defeated annexed territory, or even carry off the statues of the vanquished city's gods, a deeply symbolic act of humiliation and subjugation. Sometimes, entire populations were enslaved or displaced. It's a mainstream historical fact that these conflicts often led to significant shifts in regional power, with cities rising and falling in prominence based on their military might and strategic alliances. Historians still argue whether the primary motivation for these conflicts was purely economic, stemming from resource scarcity, or if it was deeply intertwined with religious ideologies and the perceived superiority of one city's patron deity over another. While these wars were often destructive, they also spurred innovation in military technology and organization. The need for effective leadership in battle likely contributed to the solidification of secular kingship, distinct from purely priestly roles. The constant threat also fostered a strong sense of civic identity and loyalty within each city-state. So while the sounds of battle were undoubtedly terrifying, they were also a grim, regular part of the Sumerian experience, a constant reminder that even in the cradle of civilization, peace was a precious and often fleeting commodity, and the conversations of victory and defeat echoed through the dusty plains. The relentless cycle of intercity conflicts, a hallmark of the early dynastic period, eventually set the stage for a dramatic shift in Mesopotamian history, the rise of Akkad and Sargon, Imagine the fragmented map of Sumerian city-states, each fiercely independent, suddenly being brought under the iron fist of a single charismatic leader. This wasn't just another king. This was Sargon of Akkad, a figure whose conversations with destiny seem to shape the entire region, and whose very existence is shrouded in a fascinating blend of historical fact and legendary mystery. It's a strange fact that the world's first true empire, a unified political entity on an unprecedented scale, emerged from the very land where city-states had jealously guarded their autonomy for centuries. Sargon's origins are humble, even mythical. According to his own legends, he was a man of no noble birth, an abandoned child found in a basket on the river and raised by a gardener. He rose through the ranks, serving as a cupbearer to the king of Kish before seizing power himself. This rags-to-riches story, filled with divine favor and personal ambition, is a powerful narrative designed to legitimize his rule. Historians still argue whether his legendary humble origins are pure propaganda or contain a kernel of truth, designed to appeal to a broader base than just the traditional Sumerian elite. Regardless, Sargon was clearly a military genius and a shrewd politician. What Sargon achieved was truly revolutionary. He unified Mesopotamia under a single empire. Instead of the constantly warring city-states, he systematically conquered them, one by one, extending his dominion from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. This was a scale of political control never before seen. His military campaigns were swift and decisive, utilizing innovative tactics and a disciplined professional army, rather than relying solely on seasonal citizen soldiers. The conversations within the Akkadian army must have been filled with awe for their seemingly invincible leader, who promised not just victory, but a new era of centralized power. Sargon didn't just conquer, he built. He established a new capital city, Akkad, whose location remains a mystery to this day, despite extensive archaeological efforts. This new city became the administrative heart of his vast empire, symbolizing a break from the old Sumerian city-state model. He also implemented a centralized administration, placing loyal Akkadian governors in conquered cities and replacing local rulers. This was a deliberate effort to integrate disparate territories into a cohesive whole, fostering a sense of shared imperial identity, rather than just Sumerian particularism. The rise of Akkad marked a pivotal shift, not only politically, but also culturally. While Sargon deeply respected Sumerian culture and institutions, his own language was Akkadian, a Semitic language distinct from Sumerian. This led to a fascinating period of cultural synthesis, where Sumerian and Akkadian traditions began to intertwine. Cuneiform, originally developed for Sumerian, was adapted to write Akkadian, becoming the lingua franca of the ancient Near East for centuries to come. Akkadian art often combines Sumerian motifs with new stylistic elements, creating a powerful imperial aesthetic. The very existence of this linguistic and cultural blending is a strange and beautiful fact of ancient history, showcasing how empires, even those built on conquest, can become crucibles of cultural fusion. Sargon's reign, though ultimately relatively brief, fundamentally altered the political landscape of Mesopotamia, laying the groundwork for future empires and demonstrating that a unified vision backed by military might could transform a collection of squabbling city-states into a single dominant power. His shadow loomed large over the future of the ancient Near East, a testament to his ambition and the profound impact of his conquests. Following the dramatic unification under Sargon, we arrive at the period often referred to as the Akkadian Empire's zenith, a golden age of imperial power and cultural integration that profoundly shaped the ancient Near East. Imagine a vast territory stretching across fertile plains and distant mountains, all governed from a single, powerful capital, its influence radiating outwards. This was the empire forged by Sargon and consolidated by his successors, a time when the conversations were increasingly dominated by imperial decrees, and the strange fact of a united Mesopotamia became the new reality. The mystery of how they maintained control over such a vast and diverse region for over a century is a testament to their administrative ingenuity. Under Sargon and his immediate successors, particularly Rimush, Manishtushu, and most notably Naram-Sin, the Akkadian Empire reached its greatest extent and wielded immense power. Sargon's reign saw the expansion of Akkadian power to continued military campaigns, pushing the boundaries of his empire even further. Subsequent rulers continued this policy, consolidating control over conquered territories and launching expeditions to secure vital resources and tribute. The Akkadian army, now a professional and formidable force, was instrumental in maintaining this dominance, projecting imperial authority across vast distances. One could almost hear the conversations in distant lands, nervously discussing the latest movements of the Akkadian legions, knowing that resistance was often futile. But it wasn't just military might that defined the Akkadian zenith. It was also the conscious effort towards the integration of Sumerian and Akkadian cultures. While Akkadian became the language of administration and the royal court, Sumerian remained a sacred and literary language used in temples and schools. The scribes, those crucial custodians of knowledge, were often bilingual, adept at writing both languages in cuneiform. This cultural blending is evident in Akkadian art, which frequently adopted Sumerian mythological themes and artistic conventions, but imbued them with a new imperial flair, often emphasizing the power and divinity of the Akkadian kings. The famous victory stele of Naram-Sin, for example, depicts the king as a divine figure, scaling mountains and trampling his enemies, blending traditional Mesopotamian iconography with a powerful message of imperial might. Historians still argue whether this cultural integration was a deliberate policy of enforced assimilation or a more organic process of synthesis driven by practical necessity and mutual influence. The Akkadian Empire introduced significant administrative innovations, a centralized bureaucracy overseen by appointed governors, often Akkadians loyal to the king, replaced the more decentralized system of independent city-states. Taxes and tribute flowed into the imperial capital, funding grand building projects and supporting the military. Communication networks were established to ensure swift relay of information across the empire. This level of organization was unprecedented and served as a model for future empires in the region. The very concept of a state with a defined territory and centralized authority began to solidify under Akkadian rule. However, despite its power and innovations, the Akkadian Empire also faced inherent challenges. Maintaining control over a vast and diverse territory was a constant struggle, requiring continuous military vigilance and administrative efficiency. Rebellions were frequent, especially from the conquered Sumerian cities yearning for their lost autonomy. The mystery of how these kings managed to hold such a diverse empire together for over a century, despite internal dissent and external pressures, remains a fascinating subject of study. The Akkadian Empire's zenith was a period of remarkable achievement, showcasing the potential for large-scale political unity and cultural fusion in ancient Mesopotamia, leaving an indelible mark on the region's history and setting a high bar for the empires that would follow. Just as all great empires eventually must, the mighty Akkadian Empire, after its brilliant zenith, faced its inevitable period of decline and fall of Akkad. Imagine the grand imperial conversations slowly turning to whispers of unrest, the strange fact of a unified realm beginning to unravel, piece by agonizing piece. This wasn't a sudden collapse, but a gradual weakening, brought about by a complex interplay of internal strife and mounting external pressures, a mystery whose exact causes are still debated fiercely by historians. The very ground, once so firmly under imperial control, began to tremble. The factors contributing to Akkad's downfall were multifaceted. One significant challenge was internal strife. The very act of governing such a vast and diverse empire was inherently difficult. Conquered Sumerian cities, never entirely reconciled to Akkadian rule, periodically rebelled, seeking to regain their cherished autonomy. These rebellions drained imperial resources and forced the Akkadian kings to constantly exert military force to maintain control. It was a bit like playing a never-ending game of whack-a-mole, but with actual rebellious cities instead of cartoon moles. You can almost hear the weary Akkadian administrators lamenting the latest uprising, wishing for a simpler time when their biggest problem was just figuring out how many barley rations a general needed. Beyond internal dissent, the empire also suffered from external pressures. Nomadic groups on the fringes of the empire, particularly the Gutians from the Zagros Mountains to the east, became an increasingly persistent threat. These mountain tribes, less organized but fiercely independent, launched repeated raids on Akkadian territory, disrupting trade routes, plundering agricultural lands, and weakening the imperial defenses. These constant incursions, while perhaps not individually catastrophic, cumulatively chipped away at Akkad's strength and stability. Environmental factors may have also played a role. While not a sudden dramatic event, long-term climate shifts, such as increased aridity or changes in river patterns, could have put immense strain on the agricultural base of the empire, leading to food shortages and increased unrest. A mainstream historical fact that historians often consider is the possibility of widespread drought in the region around 2200 BCE, which would have crippled agricultural output and strained the central administration's ability to feed its populace. While the exact impact is hard to quantify, such environmental stress would certainly have exacerbated existing political and social tensions. Historians still argue whether environmental degradation was a primary driver of the collapse or merely a contributing factor that hastened an already weakened state. The decline was gradual, but the end was definitive. By around 2154 BCE, after approximately 150 years of dominance, the Akkadian Empire fragmented. Its last known king, Shutarul, likely only held sway over a much reduced territory. The great city of Agade, Sargon's proud capital, was abandoned, and its exact location remains one of the great archaeological mysteries of Mesopotamia. almost as if the earth swallowed it in shame. The fall of Akkad ushered in a period of chaos and fragmentation, a dark age for Mesopotamia, as the unified structure collapsed and the old city-states, along with new regional powers, vied for control once again. The conversations that followed must have been filled with uncertainty, mourning the loss of a grand imperial vision and grappling with the strange new reality of a shattered world. The collapse of such a powerful entity serves as a stark reminder that even the most formidable empires are ultimately vulnerable to a combination of internal weaknesses and external pressures. A timeless lesson echoing from the dust of ancient Akkad. The dramatic collapse of the Akkadian Empire, which we just explored, plunged Mesopotamia into a period often characterized by confusion and foreign rule. The Gutian interregnum and chaos. Imagine the sudden silence after a grand symphony, followed by discordant notes and the unsettling absence of a clear conductor. This was a dark and tumultuous era for Sumer, a time when the familiar rhythm of centralized authority vanished, and the strange fact of mountain barbarians ruling over sophisticated city-states was the unsettling new normal. The conversations among the Sumerian populace must have been filled with anxiety, lamenting their lost sovereignty and pondering the mystery of what fate had befallen their once proud land. Following the fragmentation of the Akkadian Empire, the political vacuum was quickly filled, not by a resurgent Sumerian power, but by the Gutians. These were mountain tribes from the Zagros Mountains to the east of Mesopotamia, who had been a persistent thorn in the side of the Akkadians. Their origins and exact nature remained somewhat mysterious, but they were generally perceived by the Mesopotamians as unsophisticated, uncivilized, and destructive. Essentially, the ancient world's version of uninvited house guests who refused to leave and trashed the place. You can almost hear the Sumerians complaining, "Oh, those Gutians, they don't even know how to properly irrigate. And their table manners, don't even get me started." The Gutian period, lasting for roughly a century, circa 2154-2347 BCE, was indeed a time of instability and foreign rule. While they may have provided a degree of centralized authority in some areas, their control was largely characterized by a lack of sophisticated administration compared to the Akkadians or even the earlier Sumerian city-states. They imposed taxes and exerted military control, but they didn't seem to integrate into or contribute much to Mesopotamian culture. The economic and social fabric of the region suffered as trade routes became less secure. Agricultural output might have declined due to disrupted irrigation, and the general prosperity of the cities waned. This period is often depicted as a dark age in Mesopotamian history, an era of decline marked by a sense of cultural stagnation and political fragmentation. Contemporary Sumerian laments and later historical texts often portray the Gutian period in highly negative terms, blaming them for famine and disorder. Historians still argue whether the Gutian rule was truly as disruptive and oppressive as later Sumerian accounts suggest, or if these narratives are colored by a desire to emphasize the barbaric nature of the foreign rulers. Despite the prevailing chaos, some independent Sumerian city-states managed to maintain a degree of autonomy and even experience a modest resurgence during this time. The city of Lagash, for instance, under the enlightened rule of Gudea, enjoyed a period of peace and artistic flourishing. Gudea, known for his numerous devotional statues depicting him as a pious ruler, managed to navigate the Gutian presence, perhaps by paying tribute or through shrewd diplomacy, and focused on rebuilding temples and promoting cultural endeavors. This serves as a strange fact, a beacon of light in an otherwise gloomy period, demonstrating the enduring resilience of Sumerian culture even under foreign domination. However, for the most part, the Gutian interregnum was a period of fragmentation and uncertainty, a break in the grand narrative of Mesopotamian empires. It highlighted the fragility of even the most powerful political structures and underscored the deep desire among the Sumerians for native rule and a return to prosperity. The conversations of this era must have been filled with longing for a stronger, more just leader to emerge, to expel the foreign occupiers and to restore the ancient glories of Sumer. And indeed, as we shall see, that wish would eventually come to fruition, leading to a glorious, albeit fleeting, renaissance. The mystery for the Sumerians was not if the Gutians would be expelled, but when and by whom. From the shadow of the Gutian interregnum, the Sumerian spirit, like a resilient seed, once again pushed through the soil, leading to a glorious, if ultimately poignant, period known as the Sumerian Renaissance. Part 3. Imagine the collective sigh of relief, the conversation shifting from oppression and uncertainty to hope and renewed purpose as the Sumerians shook off foreign domination and embarked on a powerful resurgence of their own culture and political centralization. It's a strange fact that after a century of perceived darkness, Sumer would once again rise to such prominence, demonstrating an extraordinary capacity for revival. The catalyst for this renaissance was the city of Ur, a city with a long and distinguished history. Remember those royal tombs? Under the leadership of Ur-Nammu, a former governor of Ur, the Gutians were finally expelled from Mesopotamia. This wasn't just a military victory. It was a powerful statement, a reclamation of Sumerian destiny. Ur-Nammu then embarked on a mission, not just to liberate, but to rebuild and unify. He established the third dynasty of Ur, commonly known as Ur-the-Hrum, around 2112 BCE, signaling a return to centralized, native Mesopotamian rule. It was as if the ancient gods themselves had decided, all right, playtime's over, let's get things back in order. The Ur-the-Hrum period was characterized by a powerful resurgence of Sumerian culture. After the Akkadian interlude and the Gutian disruption, there was a conscious effort to revive and emphasize Sumerian language, literature, and religious traditions. Sumerian became the official language of the state, used in administration and monumental inscriptions, even though Akkadian was still widely spoken. This was a deliberate policy to foster a strong sense of Sumerian national identity and to legitimize the new dynasty. Think of it as a cultural reset, bringing back the classics and making them fashionable again. Crucially, the Ur-3 dynasty also brought about an unprecedented level of political centralization. Ur-Nammu and his successors, notably Shulgi, established a highly organized, bureaucratic state that rivaled and in some ways surpassed the administrative efficiency of the Akkadian Empire. They created a vast network of provincial governors, collected regular taxes, standardized weights and measures, and implemented a sophisticated census system. This wasn't just about control. It was about creating a highly efficient state capable of managing vast resources and undertaking ambitious projects. It's a mainstream historical fact that the sheer volume of administrative texts from the Ur-3 period meticulously recording everything from grain disbursements to livestock inventories, provides an unparalleled glimpse into the workings of their highly centralized economy. Historians still argue whether this centralization was a true renaissance of Sumerian values or a more pragmatic adaptation of Akkadian imperial models. Simply with Sumerian leadership, the rulers of Ur III also embarked on extensive building programs, repairing and constructing temples and ziggurats across their domain. Ur-Nammu himself initiated the construction of the Great Ziggurat of Ur, a magnificent stepped pyramid dedicated to the moon god Nanna, which stands, or rather, its impressive ruins stand, as a powerful symbol of the dynasty's piety and imperial ambition. The conversations among the populace must have been filled with awe at these monumental constructions, seeing them as tangible proof of Sumer's renewed power and divine favor. The mystery of how they managed such massive labor forces without modern machinery still inspires wonder, a testament to their organizational prowess and the deep faith that united them in these grand endeavors. The Sumerian Renaissance was a testament to the enduring spirit of a civilization that refused to be extinguished, rising from the ashes to reclaim its former glory, even if for a relatively brief, shining moment. Building upon the resurgence of Sumerian culture and the strong leadership of Ur-Nammu, the Ur III period solidified its dominance through a remarkable system of governance, the Neo-Sumerian state administration. Imagine a bureaucracy so meticulously organized, so thorough in its record-keeping, that it could track almost every bushel of barley, every head of cattle, and every day of labor across an entire empire. This wasn't just good management. It was a strange fact of ancient efficiency, a system so refined it almost feels modern. The conversations in the administrative offices of Ur must have been a constant hum of calculations, inventories, and the precise click of reed styluses on wet clay, all part of a sophisticated legal system designed to bring order to a vast realm. The rulers of Ur III, particularly King Shulgi, Ur-Nammu's son, were masters of organization. They established a truly highly organized bureaucracy that extended from the central palace in Ur to the smallest villages in their domain. This administration was characterized by standardization. Weights and measures were standardized across the empire, facilitating trade and taxation. Even the number of bricks in a standard wall, or the daily ration of grain for workers, was meticulously defined. Centralized control. Provinces were governed by loyal officials appointed by the king, who reported directly to Ur. These governors were responsible for collecting taxes, managing local resources, and maintaining order, massive record-keeping. This is where the scribes truly shone. Tens of thousands of cuneiform tablets from this period have been unearthed, detailing an astonishing array of administrative information. We have records of livestock movements, grain distribution, labor assignments, temple offerings, and even the daily wages of laborers. It's almost as if they were trying to invent ancient Excel spreadsheets, but with more clay and less crashing. This meticulous record-keeping is a mainstream historical fact that provides unparalleled insight into the economic and social life of the time. This administrative machinery underpinned a sophisticated and comprehensive legal system. The most famous example is the Code of Ur-Nammu, dating to around 2100 to 2050 BCE, which predates Hammurabi's famous code by centuries. While only fragments of it survive, it reveals a system of justice based on fines and compensation, rather than the eye for an eye retribution seen in later codes. It covered various aspects of daily life, including marriage, divorce, slavery, property rights, and offenses like assault. Imagine the conversations in ancient courtrooms with plaintiffs and defendants presenting their cases, relying on these written laws. It demonstrates a society striving for fairness and order, even if their concept of justice might differ from ours. Historians still argue whether the Code of Urnamu was a truly implemented legal framework, or primarily a statement of royal ideology and principles. The purpose of this vast administrative and legal apparatus was to efficiently manage the vast resources of the empire, collect taxes, ensure justice, and provide for the welfare of the population. It allowed the Ur-3 kings to undertake massive building projects, maintain a standing army, and patronize the arts and sciences. The mystery for us is how they trained and managed so many scribes and administrators, ensuring consistency and accuracy across such a large domain without modern communication tools. Their postal system, which relied on messengers carrying sealed letters, was remarkably efficient for its time. The Neo-Sumerian state administration was a testament to Sumerian ingenuity and their capacity for complex social and political organization. It ensured a period of relative peace and prosperity, allowing for the flourishing of their culture and economy. It was a golden age of bureaucracy, where every action, every transaction, every legal dispute was meticulously documented, leaving behind a rich tapestry of conversations and insights for us to uncover millennia later. A remarkable legacy of order and foresight in the ancient world. From the intricate workings of administration, let's now elevate our gaze to the monumental structures that dominated the Sumerian landscape and served as powerful symbols of their profound religious beliefs. The ziggurat as cosmic mountain. Imagine looking up at a towering, multi-tiered structure of baked bricks rising majestically from the flat Mesopotamian plain, almost touching the sky. These weren't just big buildings. They were physical manifestations of a spiritual concept, drawing the conversations of mortals closer to the divine. And their very existence is a strange fact of architectural and religious ambition. The mystery of how they achieved such scale and precision with ancient building techniques continues to baffle engineers today. Ziggurats were the most distinctive architectural features of Sumerian cities, serving as the focal point for religious worship and powerful symbols of divine presence. Unlike Egyptian pyramids, which were primarily tombs, ziggurats were massive temple platforms designed to bring the worshipper closer to the heavens. They were essentially artificial mountains, a concept deeply rooted in Sumerian cosmology, where the gods were believed to reside in high places, often associated with mountains. Each city-state had its own ziggurat, dedicated to its patron deity, making it a proud symbol of civic and religious identity. It's almost as if the architects were saying, "If you can't go to the mountain, we'll build you one." The design of a ziggurat was typically a stepped pyramid with successive receding levels topped by a shrine or temple. The Great Ziggurat of Ur, commissioned by Ur-Nammu, remember him from section 17, is the most famous and best preserved example. Originally, it would have had 3 main levels, with a temple on the summit reached by massive staircases. These structures were built primarily of mud brick, with an outer casing of baked brick for durability, often laid with bitumen as mortar, a kind of natural asphalt. The sheer scale of the construction required immense labor and sophisticated planning, demonstrating the incredible organizational capacity of the Sumerians. You can almost hear the thousands of workers passing bricks hand to hand, their conversations filled with sweat and determination, all fueled by a collective devotion to their gods. The ziggurat served as a vital link between the earthly and the divine. The shrine at the top was believed to be the dwelling place of the city's patron god or goddess, where priests performed sacred rituals and received divine communications. These were not public places of worship in the way a modern church or mosque might be. Access to the uppermost shrine was typically restricted to the high priests and the king. The public would have gathered at the base or in courtyards surrounding the ziggurat for ceremonies and festivals. This controlled access added to the mystery and awe surrounding the sacred space. These towering structures were more than just temples. They were symbols of divine power and the prosperity of the city-state. Their construction was an act of piety, a way for the king and his people to honor their gods and ensure their continued favor and protection. A well-maintained ziggurat was a sign of a strong and righteous ruler. It's a mainstream historical fact that the ziggurat, in its architectural form, continued to influence temple construction in Mesopotamia for millennia. Historians still argue whether the primary motivation for building such colossal structures was purely religious devotion, or if it also served as a powerful tool for political legitimation, demonstrating the king's wealth, power, and close connection to the divine, thereby reinforcing his authority over the populace. Regardless, these ancient cosmic mountains continue to speak to us, whispering tales of devotion, power, and the enduring human desire to reach for the heavens. From the heights of the ziggurats, where divine law was presumably whispered, we now descend to the practicalities of human interaction and governance, law and justice in Sumerian society. Imagine a society grappling with the complexities of urban life, where disputes over property, contracts, and even personal injury were daily occurrences. How did they maintain order? The answer lies in their remarkably sophisticated legal codes, which served as the bedrock for societal order and established precedents for justice. It's a strange fact that some of the earliest written laws in human history emerged from this ancient land, guiding conversations and resolving conflicts with a clarity that still impresses. The Sumerians were pioneers in codifying laws, moving beyond customary practices to written statutes that could be applied consistently. The most famous early example, as briefly mentioned, is the Code of Ur-Nammu, dating from the Ur-Thra period, around 2100-2050 BCE. While only fragments have been recovered, what remains is profoundly significant. This code predates the more widely known Code of Hammurabi by several centuries and offers a fascinating glimpse into Sumerian legal principles. Historians still argue whether the Code of Ur-Nammu was primarily an ideal statement of justice or a fully enforceable legal document that was actively applied in courts throughout the empire. One of the most striking features of the Code of Ur-Nammu is its emphasis on fines and compensation rather than the severe eye for an eye, lex talionis, principle that would characterize later Mesopotamian law, particularly Hammurabi's. For instance, if a man broke another man's limb, The penalty was a monetary fine, not the loss of his own limb. This suggests a more conciliatory and restorative approach to justice in Sumerian society. You can almost imagine the ancient judges presiding over cases, carefully weighing the evidence and consulting these written tablets, trying to mediate a fair outcome rather than simply imposing brutal retaliation. The conversations in these early courtrooms, though long silent, must have been surprisingly nuanced. These early legal codes established precedents for various aspects of daily life. They covered family law, marriage, divorce, inheritance, property law, land ownership, sales, leases, contracts, and criminal offenses, theft, assault, slander. The very act of writing down laws was revolutionary. It meant that justice was no longer solely dependent on the whims of a ruler or the memory of a judge. It provided a tangible, public standard against which actions could be measured and disputes resolved. This transparency, for its time, was a remarkable step towards a more equitable society. The judicial system involved local courts, often presided over by elders or prominent citizens, and higher courts associated with the temple or palace. Decisions were recorded, contributing to the vast corpus of cuneiform tablets. The role of the king was ultimately to ensure justice throughout the land, and Sumerian rulers often boasted of establishing justice and equity as a hallmark of their reign. This was not just rhetoric. It was a fundamental expectation of good governance, a concept that continues to resonate today. The mystery of how these legal principles were disseminated and enforced across a broad empire, especially without modern communication, speaks to the strength of their administrative structure and the power of written law. The Sumerian legal tradition, though ancient, laid crucial groundwork for later legal systems, including those of the Babylonians and Assyrians, and perhaps indirectly, even the very foundations of Western legal thought. It's a mainstream historical fact that the concept of written law and its application in civil society can be traced back to these early Sumerian codes. So, when you consider the conversations about justice and fairness that still define our world, remember that many of those fundamental ideas began to take shape in clay on the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates thousands of years ago. From the dry legal codes that govern their society, let's now consider the vibrant intellectual life that made such complexity possible: education and scribes' importance. Imagine a young Sumerian child, perhaps from a well-to-do family, diligently practicing their cuneiform signs on a clay tablet. Their conversations focused on mastering the intricate wedges and lines. This wasn't just about reading and writing. It was about entering an elite profession, for scribes were crucial to Sumerian administration, and their education was a highly valued, specialized pursuit. A strange fact, given how few people were literate in most ancient societies. The mystery of how they developed such a comprehensive educational system so early in human history continues to fascinate. The core of Sumerian education revolved around the Edaba, or tablet house, which served as a school for aspiring scribes. These institutions, often attached to temples or palaces, provided a rigorous curriculum that could last for many years. It was no quick course. Becoming a master scribe was a significant undertaking, akin to earning a modern-day doctorate. You can almost hear the ancient schoolmaster tapping a disgruntled student with a stick, reminding them that perfect wedge marks were essential for a stable empire. No lazy, scribbling young one. The king's grain inventory depends on your precision. The curriculum was comprehensive, starting with the basics of cuneiform signs, which numbered in the hundreds, before moving on to more complex vocabulary, grammar, and literary texts. Students would copy and recite lists of signs, words, and proverbs, progressing to more challenging texts like hymns, myths, and legal documents. They also learned mathematics, accounting, and even some rudimentary astronomy. The sheer volume of practice tablets, unearthed by archaeologists, showing everything from first attempts to perfect copies, is a mainstream historical fact that provides a vivid picture of their educational methods. Historians still argue whether the Edinburgh system was purely vocational, designed only to produce scribes, or if it also served as a broader cultural institution, transmitting Sumerian intellectual traditions. The importance of scribes cannot be overstated. In a society that relied so heavily on written records for administration, law, trade, and religious practice, scribes were the backbone of the entire system. They were the record keepers, the accountants, the legal clerks, the diplomats, and the intellectual custodians. Without them, the vast bureaucracy of the Ur-3 Empire, for instance, would simply have collapsed. Their ability to read and write was a powerful tool, granting them considerable prestige and influence within society. They were the ones who could literally make sense of the world, transforming oral tradition into permanent archives. It's a bit like being the only one who knows how to operate the internet in a world that's just invented electricity. Beyond administration, scribes were also instrumental in preserving and creating Sumerian literature, including the great epics, myths, and hymns. They were not just copyists. Many were also authors and poets, contributing to the rich intellectual heritage of Sumer. The mysterious process by which these literary works were composed, refined, and disseminated across generations speaks to a sophisticated intellectual culture. The emphasis on education and the elevated status of scribes highlight a remarkable aspect of Sumerian civilization: their profound respect for knowledge and the written word. They understood that information was power, and that organized learning was essential for the functioning and flourishing of their complex society. The conversations in the tablet houses, filled with the scratching of styluses and the drone of recitation, laid the groundwork for future intellectual advancements, a testament to Sumer's enduring legacy in the realm of human knowledge. From the hallowed halls of the Eduba and the meticulous world of scribes, our narrative now takes a somber turn, moving towards the inevitable decline of even the greatest empires, the lament for Ur's destruction. Imagine the conversations in the once proud city of Ur, now filled with wails of despair and the haunting silence where bustling markets once stood. The vibrant Sumerian Renaissance, which saw Ur rise to such prominence, was tragically brought to an end. A strange fact, given its previous strength, leaving behind a profound sense of loss and a poignant subject for poetic expression. The mystery of how a city so grand could fall so completely remains a powerful theme. The third dynasty of Ur, despite its administrative brilliance and cultural revival, lasted for only about a century. Its downfall was not sudden, but a culmination of internal weaknesses and relentless external pressures. The vast bureaucracy, while efficient, also created a heavy tax burden on the populace. Furthermore, the empire's borders were constantly threatened by various nomadic groups and rival powers. The most significant threat came from the Elamites, from the mountainous region to the east of Mesopotamia, modern-day Iran, and the Amorites, semi-nomadic tribes from the western deserts. These groups had been steadily encroaching on Sumerian territory, weakening the empire's control. The final blow came around 2004 BCE, when a combined force of Elamites and Amorites launched a devastating attack on Ur itself. The city, once the heart of a powerful empire, was besieged, sacked, and ultimately destroyed. The scale of the destruction was immense, leaving the grand ziggurat and temples in ruins and its population decimated or carried off into captivity. It's a mainstream historical fact that the fall of Urthethrode marked the definitive end of Sumerian political dominance in Mesopotamia. You can almost hear the heartbreaking conversations of the survivors, recounting the horrors of the siege, the burning buildings, and the tragic loss of everything they held dear. "Remember the Golden Age?" they might have whispered. It feels like 1,000 years ago now. This catastrophic event became the subject of a powerful literary genre known as the Sumerian laments, particularly the Lament for Ur. These deeply moving poems, inscribed on clay tablets, mourn the destruction of the city, the desecration of its temples, and the suffering of its people. They attribute the disaster to the abandonment of the city by its patron deity, the moon god Nana, and his consort Ningal, a common theme in Mesopotamian theology, where divine favor was linked to the prosperity of the city. These laments are not just historical records. They are profound expressions of communal grief, akin to ancient elegies, allowing us to feel the raw emotion of a civilization witnessing its own decline. The sheer emotional depth of these texts, written millennia ago, is a strange fact, bridging the vast chasm of time to connect us to their sorrow. The eventual fall of Urthethrode, attributed to Elamite invaders, was a pivotal moment. It marked the end of an era, the last significant period of independent Sumerian political power. While Sumerian language and culture would continue to influence subsequent Mesopotamian empires, they would never again wield independent political authority on such a grand scale. The mystery for the ancient Sumerians was not just why their beloved city fell, but how they could possibly rebuild from such devastation, and whether their gods would ever truly return to bless their land. The Lamentations serve as a haunting reminder of the cyclical nature of empires and the profound sorrow that accompanies their demise. A powerful echo from the ruins of Ur. Despite the devastating fall of Ur and the end of Sumerian political independence, their story is far from over. Indeed, their most enduring legacy lies in the incredible breadth of their intellectual and practical contributions, the legacy of Sumerian innovations. Imagine how many of the fundamental building blocks of modern civilization, from the way we communicate to the way we count time, have their roots in the inventive minds of this ancient people. It's a strange fact that a civilization that flourished so long ago could lay such foundational stones for future societies, a continuous conversation across millennia. The mystery isn't just what they invented, but how they managed to achieve so much with such rudimentary tools. Let's start with arguably their most famous contribution, writing. As we've discussed, the development of cuneiform wasn't just a convenient way to keep records. It was a revolution in human communication. It transformed fleeting oral traditions into permanent archives. allowing for the systematic accumulation and transmission of knowledge without cuneiform, the vast administrative machinery of Ur III, the epic tales of Gilgamesh, and the legal codes that brought order to society would simply not exist. This single innovation alone changed the trajectory of human history, paving the way for literacy, bureaucracy, and the very concept of recorded history itself. It's the ultimate ancient Ctrl+S button for human thought. Beyond writing, the Sumerians were remarkably adept in mathematics. They developed a sexagesimal, base 60 number system, which might sound peculiar to us with our base 10 system, but it had profound practical applications. Think about it. The number 60 is easily divisible by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30. This made calculations for trade, land measurement, and timekeeping incredibly efficient. This is a mainstream historical fact that still impacts our lives today. Our division of a circle into 360 degrees and of an hour into 60 minutes and a minute into 60 seconds are direct descendants of Sumerian mathematics. So, the next time you glance at a clock, give a little nod to those ancient mathematicians who figured out a pretty good way to track the passage of time. Historians still argue whether their complex mathematical understanding was primarily driven by practical needs in administration and engineering, or if it also involved a more abstract, theoretical pursuit. Their understanding of astronomy was equally impressive. While primarily driven by religious and astrological beliefs, they believed celestial events influenced earthly affairs. Their meticulous observations of the stars, planets, and moon cycles allowed them to develop a sophisticated calendar. This lunar calendar, with its division into 12 months, was crucial for agricultural planning and regulating religious festivals. Their ability to predict eclipses, though perhaps not fully understood in a scientific sense, was remarkable. These astronomical observations also laid the groundwork for later Babylonian and Greek astronomy, demonstrating a keen eye for patterns in the cosmos. Beyond these giants, Sumerian innovations extended to numerous other fields. Their architectural ingenuity gave us the ziggurat, but also advanced construction techniques like the arch, the dome, and the use of buttresses. Their agricultural advancements, particularly their sophisticated irrigation systems, transformed arid lands into fertile breadbaskets. They invented the wheel, though its use in pottery may predate its use in transportation, significantly improving efficiency in both crafts and transport. They developed the plow, refined metallurgy, and created early forms of legal codes. The conversations they had around these innovations, debating their efficacy and refining their designs, were the very engine of progress. The mystery of how so many fundamental inventions sprang from a single civilization in such an early period continues to inspire awe at the sheer inventiveness of the Sumerian mind. Their legacy is not just etched in stone, but woven into the very fabric of how we organize our lives today. The brilliance of Sumerian innovations didn't simply vanish with the fall of their political dominance. Instead, it formed the deep and resonant substratum upon which later civilizations built, creating an enduring influence on later cultures. Imagine the quiet echoes of Sumerian thought, their customs, and their profound ideas reverberating through time, shaping the conversations of empires that rose and fell long after Ur lay in ruins. It's a strange fact that a culture can lose its political independence, but maintain such a powerful grip on the intellectual and spiritual life of subsequent societies, a testament to the universal appeal of their fundamental concepts. The mystery isn't if they influenced others, but how deeply their fingerprints are embedded in traditions far beyond their geographical borders. The most immediate and obvious beneficiaries of Sumerian influence were their direct successors in Mesopotamia, the Akkadians, the Babylonians, and the Assyrians. The Akkadians, though speaking a Semitic language, adopted cuneiform for their own tongue and absorbed much of Sumerian religion, literature, and administrative practices. This process of cultural assimilation continued and deepened with the Babylonians and Assyrians, who saw themselves as heirs to the ancient Sumerian tradition. The great Babylonian kings, like Hammurabi, codified laws that built upon earlier Sumerian legal principles. Assyrian art and architecture often drew inspiration from Sumerian and Akkadian precedents. The very concept of the ziggurat, for instance, continued to be a prominent feature in Mesopotamian religious architecture for millennia, a mainstream historical fact that underscores this profound continuity. You can almost hear the later kings and scribes, perhaps with a touch of gentle sarcasm, referencing Sumerian proverbs or myths, saying, as the wise Sumerians once said, beyond Mesopotamia, the influence of Sumerian civilization rippled outwards. Their innovations in mathematics and astronomy found their way through Babylonian intermediaries into the hands of the ancient Greeks, who then further developed these fields. The very division of the circle into 360 degrees and the hour into 60 minutes, which we discussed, ultimately made its way into the Western world through this long, winding cultural transmission. It's a bit like watching a pebble drop into a pond, and the ripples just keep going, touching distant shores. Perhaps most profoundly, Sumerian literary and religious traditions exerted a significant influence. The Epic of Gilgamesh, with its themes of friendship, mortality, and a great flood, bears striking resemblances to later flood narratives found in other cultures, including the biblical account of Noah's Ark. While direct lines of transmission are often debated, the existence of such parallels suggests a shared cultural substratum, or at least a powerful influence. The stories of their gods and goddesses, their cosmology, and their concepts of the underworld also filtered into later mythologies, albeit often adapted and reinterpreted. Historians still argue whether these similarities are a direct result of cultural borrowing or independent development stemming from shared human experiences. The mystery of how these narratives transcended linguistic and cultural barriers to become part of a broader human story is truly captivating. Even the organizational principles developed by the Sumerians, centralized administration, codified law, and large-scale public works managed by complex bureaucracies, provided templates for future empires and states. Their fundamental contributions to urbanism and the very idea of civilization became a blueprint for subsequent societies across the Near East and beyond. The conversations they initiated, through their writing, their laws, and their myths, continued to echo through the centuries, ensuring that the Sumerians, though long gone from the political stage, remained a powerful, invisible hand shaping the course of human history. Their genius was a seed that blossomed into countless flowers in the gardens of later cultures. Our long journey through the history of Sumer culminates not in a single dramatic event, but in the ongoing quiet dedication of those who continue to peel back the layers of time. unveiling buried city secrets. Imagine the dust motes dancing in the shafts of sunlight that penetrate ancient ruins. As archaeologists, piece by painstaking piece, reconstruct the conversations, the strange facts, and the enduring mysteries of a civilization long vanished. It's a testament to human curiosity that even millennia later, we are still actively learning about the Sumerians, with every new discovery adding another brushstroke to their complex portrait. The very ground of Mesopotamia, particularly the southern plains, is still holding countless untold stories, waiting for patient hands to unearth them. Modern archaeology continues to be the primary method by which we expand our understanding of the Sumerian civilization. Since the initial excavations in the 19th and early 20th centuries, which first brought Sumer to the attention of the world, a strange fact, considering they were largely forgotten for millennia before then. Subsequent generations of archaeologists have refined their techniques, utilizing everything from satellite imagery to ground-penetrating radar to locate and meticulously excavate ancient sites. These aren't treasure hunts. They are careful scientific endeavors aimed at understanding the past in its fullest context. You can almost hear the excited, hushed conversations among field teams as they uncover a new cuneiform tablet or a previously unknown architectural feature, knowing they are literally holding history in their hands. The work of deciphering the secrets of Sumer is a continuous, painstaking process. Every new cuneiform tablet unearthed offers fresh insights into their administration, their daily lives, their literature, and their beliefs. Scholars meticulously translate these texts, often revealing details that challenge previous assumptions or confirm long-held theories. For example, recent discoveries of administrative archives have shed new light on the economic organization of specific city-states, providing a more nuanced picture than what was gleaned from royal inscriptions alone. This constant process of translation and interpretation is a mainstream historical fact that keeps Sumerian studies a vibrant and evolving field. Historians still argue about the precise phonetic values of certain cuneiform signs, a fascinating linguistic mystery that continues to be refined through scholarly debate. Beyond the texts, the material culture, the pottery, tools, seals, and architectural remains provides invaluable non-written evidence. The careful analysis of these artifacts, their composition, their context, and their distribution allows archaeologists to reconstruct patterns of trade, social organization, technological development, and even environmental conditions. When an archaeologist discovers a particular type of pottery in a distant land, it sparks a conversation about ancient trade routes. When they find evidence of a massive flood layer, it adds to the mystery of how environmental factors influenced their history. The field of Sumerian archaeology is dynamic, with new discoveries being made regularly, often through international collaborations. Each dig, each translated tablet, each analyzed artifact helps to build a more complete and accurate picture of this foundational civilization. It's a continuous unveiling, a slow but steady revelation of the daily lives, the grand ambitions, the struggles, and the triumphs of the Sumerians. They may be long gone, their cities buried under the dust of millennia, but through the dedicated work of those who dig and decipher, their voices still speak to us, whispering their strange facts and inviting us to continue the conversation with a past that is far from silent. Their story, thankfully, is still being written, one shovel stroke and one translation at a time. You feel that gentle tug, don't you? That soft, almost imperceptible pull back from the dusty plains of ancient Mesopotamia, away from the towering ziggurats and the hushed conversations of scribes. The echoes of Sumer, once so vivid and immediate, are beginning to soften, blurring at the edges like a fading dream. We've walked through their bustling cities, stood in awe of their ingenuity, and felt the weight of their sorrow as their great fell. Their world, with its strange facts and timeless mysteries, now recedes, becoming a comforting murmur in the quiet spaces of your mind. The stories of Gilgamesh, the tireless efforts of their farmers, the intricate beauty of their craftsmanship, these aren't just dry historical facts. They are threads woven into the very fabric of human experience, whispers from the dawn of civilization that resonate even now. Think of the water flowing in the canals, the rhythm of the potter's wheel, the quiet scratching of a stylus on clay. These were lives lived with purpose, with dreams, with moments of joy and hardship, just like our own. As the last images of their ancient world gently fade, allow yourself to drift, to let the weight of their long history settle into a peaceful stillness. The Sumerians, in their profound human way, have shared their story, their innovations, and their enduring spirit. Now, the work is done, the narrative complete. Let your thoughts settle, like the ancient silt upon the fertile plains. Rest easy, knowing that in the quiet of this moment, you've touched the very beginnings of human civilization.